can't help but love Al. People always formed relationships with him. He had 800 people at his living wake, which was his funeral. He had 800 people come through the door. He was always out in the sun, outdoor worker. His hobbies were diving, surfing, fishing, bike riding. Many years later, Allan being a quadriplegic, he was always cold, so he would tilt his chair and lie in the sun, but we would have to smother him with sunscreen. Always had a bucket hat on, but he still, to the very last moment, was out in the sun. So Allan loved rugby. He just went to play in the grand final. Al said, I wasn't 100th of a second completely set. And when the scrum impacted, he said, I knew straight away. His spinal cord was injured and the whole world changed. You learn how to live life differently. And then when melanoma came along, you learn a new life again. Al had just like a little pink spot on his chest. Doctor had a look at it and said, I'm just going to take a little biopsy. And he said, it is melanoma. That's already a level 3 on the Bristol. And of course, Allan, he said, take as much margin as you can, check the central node, check the axillae node, and if they're all clear, leave me be.
Me and my husband Matt inherited Julie and Allan McCabe from Matt's predecessor. He was one of the most cheekiest patients I've ever met in my life. So as a GP, we're the ones that were seeing patients regularly. We're the one port of call, which means we can do two things. We can kind of pick up on things when we just examine patients. And then secondly, often the patients will come to GPs for their annual skin checks as well. When you're training to be a GP, it's quite extensive. You're taught how to use a dermatoscope, which is a special little device that you can look at skin lesions through. You also do quite a lot of training on recognising skin cancers and the management of skin cancers to a certain degree before a specialist needs to come in and get involved. I would prefer to tell someone 100 days of the year, that's benign, that's absolutely fine, rather than going, I'm sorry, you've got a melanoma. And I speak for all my colleagues to just get a skin check, or even if it's just a tiny mole that you're worried about, that's new, that's changed, just come in, get it checked. It takes 5 minutes, and those 5 minutes could potentially save your life.
It was 5 years later that it came back. His air expiry and intake was becoming more shallow. Matt, our doctor, said, look, I think Al needs to go to the hospital. It was all internal. Melanoma all through Al's abdomen. You know, his choices, it just didn't look very good for Al. He said, I don't like what that's going to do to me. He decided that it was just time to live. And that's what we did. Our social life was huge. They'd all come and get him and include him in everything. This is where he grew up, this is where he was born, and they just all surrounded him all the time. That's what he needed, he loved it, and I think he gave back. Like, people would come in and not really know what to say, and then they'd leave and go, far out, he made me feel better. He knew that he could die the way he wanted to and in the place that he wanted to. It was the most beautiful experience with all of our people who loved him dearly. His beautiful mate Will, who was his carer for so long, came to see him to say goodbye. And the palliative nurse said, I don't think Al's going to respond to you, Will. Anyway, Al just opened his eyes and he looked at Will. I won't say the swear word, and he said, I haven't freaking finished with you yet. And Will just, he lost it. He just said, right, I'm good to go now. Al's just, he's still there. He made other people feel better, even though he was passing.
Cheers. Have a sip. Come on.
He died graciously and humbly. He didn't even make a sound. Al said to Lois, well, Lois, I don't want to go in any garden or under a tree or out in the ocean. He said, I just want to stalk her in her handbag every day of her life. So Lois bought this beautiful handbag, and here we are, we have Al. And he's still very much a part of our lives. He goes everywhere I go. And there's even pictures in there, the kids all drawing pictures, they're all in there with him. He's got his travel papers in there when it's time to travel. There he goes to the pub, yeah. And every time you go there with the rugby old boys, there's always a black beer right there. And they love it too. I always say to them, I just walk in and hand him straight to them and off they go. So he's very much a part of our life. So yeah, then that's been the story from since 1983 until when he passed, but we're still married. That's the way it will always be, I think, for me.